everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 2 of NATSUME Yujin-CHO, or Natsume's Book of Friends. And last week we started the series, and I really liked it, but that episode went by way too fast. So I couldn't wait. I was like, no. We met Natsume. We also met Madara, who is a sensei, this cat spirit, this yokai, who he wants basically to get a hold of this book of names that Natsume's grandmother had, and those names basically allow whoever has the book to control those spirits. So Madara seems like a little bit of a mischievous troublemaker, but he can't get his hands on the book. Instead, he has to befriend and join up with Natsume. And Natsume has made it his mission to kind of basically undo everything that his grandmother did. She collected all these names. He really doesn't want to have anything to do with the spirits, but instead he's like, I'm going to let y'all go. I'm going to find you, give you your name back from the book, and then basically close what my grandmother has done, essentially, and hopefully, I feel like in his mind, be rid of the spirits. And Madara is just kind of like going along with it in hopes that they can get the book from him, but I think there's more to it than that, but we don't know exactly what, because Madara is like, oh, I want the book, and then when Natsume's like, I'm gonna let all these spirits that you could control go, he's like, sure. So I'm very curious to see what ends up happening with the book, what ends up going on, and how this adventure of him trying to track down all these spirits ends up going, because there's quite a few names in that book, which it's a long series, so there we go. But I'm very curious. I like the spirituality of this story so far. I like the idea that he can see ghosts, and that he's connected to them, and the idea that he's trying to be a little bit different than his grandmother. I'm excited to see what we learn about the grandmother. I think that Madara had a crush on her, but I'm just saying, I think it was like what we all wanted Spirited Away to be, but I think that's the case. But who knows? I don't know. Last episode, a lot happened. It set everything up, and it had to do so in like 20 minutes. So I feel like we flew through everything. So I am excited now to go back through and see exactly what happens. But I'm super excited. So I want to give a very quick shout out before we begin to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to go ahead and see next week's episode after this, you can join on Patreon. But also, in addition to voting in the polls, to talking in the Discord, and to seeing the episodes early, also those people that donate a little bit extra each month, they're so supportive and kind and gracious, and I'm very appreciative of everything they do to help support the channel and to help pay for me watching these reactions. So I want to give a special shout out over to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Dana, to Destiny Marie, to Danger Zone, to Eric, to Kiri, to Lyndon, to Murphew, to Nameless Monster, to Nicholas, to Matthew Palfinier, El Freya, Boo Boo, as well as Sunspots, Shimoyama, Trails, Translucent Men, Danny, Donmai, and Danovan. Thank you all so very much for all of your support. I really appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, I poured myself a little bit of coffee this evening. It's a little bit warm outside, so this is not the best beverage of choice, but whatever. When in Natsume's Book of Friends, what can we do? So I'm really excited to see what happens. I hope you all are too, but we are not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right in and see this episode, as it were be. And we are going to start Natsume's Book of Friends, Yujin-CHO, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's dive into episode 2. Well, I wasn't expecting to get misty-eyed this soon in the series. Oh my gosh, that episode was so sad. I wasn't ready for us to get into some deep, depressing territory. This show is very interesting. This show is very interesting because it's reminding me of like a more spiritual Fruits Basket, but it's also reminding me in this episode of a Chinese Danmai series called Heaven Official's Blessing. I'm not going to, this doesn't really give any spoilers away because you find out in the first part of the story that this is a thing. But in Heaven Official's Blessing, there's a concept that there are these heavenly officials that are essentially gods. And the more they are worshipped, the more power they get. But if they are not worshipped at all, they cease to have any power and could potentially cease to exist. So the concept that this little old Tsuyukami only has like one follower left and then evaporates into nothing. It's like, oh my God, that's so sad. And then it's like there's a plot point where the woman Hana is like at the shrine and she thinks that she hears a Tsuyukami, and she's just like, she wanted to talk back but she chose not to. And a part of me was like, girl, if you had been in Heaven Official's Blessing, you would have been talking to that spirit. But I think it makes it all the more tragic and bittersweet and beautiful at the end when they get to meet up again and they get to talk to each other. And it's like, oh my gosh. Oh, and that's the thing. Like, he says that he was passing himself off like a deity, but he wasn't really a deity. He was just a spirit that like took residence at this shrine and ends up getting worshipped. And it just, that was so bittersweet. But we're going to talk about Reiko and the Book of Friends and all this. But I want to kind of, it feels like this episode needs to be gone through in chronological order. These episodes go by so quickly. Like, they just fly by. They're just like that, done, boom, over. And you're like, what did I miss? Was there something I should have been taking note of? But yeah, they go by so quickly. It's kind of insane. But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about this, the idea of the test of courage. And it's all set up. I honestly thought at the beginning of this that it was setting up something that was going to actually have precedence. But the main thing I think we get out of this opening scene, we have the two bro friends that are Natsume's friends. But then Sasada is the class president. She's the class president in all this. She seems very no nonsense, very stereotypical Japanese class president, like just get everything together. And she's organizing this like test of courage house or whatnot. But I think there are two things that are important that come out of meeting Sasada. One is that she can sense spirits. Like the other guys, I don't even notice. But she can sense some form of spirit there in the episode. And then the other thing is just establishing that Natsume, we talked last episode about how Reiko, Madara says that Reiko struggled to maintain and have friends because of her being able to see yokai. And we kind of see that with Natsume. Like in the last episode, I was like, oh, Natsume seems to have a great relationship with his friends. But here you kind of do see sort of how it's hindering him a little bit from being able to interact with others, just in the fact that he's kind of in this situation where he can see spirits, but no one else can. So when he looks off and sees a spirit, they think that he's just being kind of different. And I could see why it would kind of isolate him a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to be curious to see where that goes. This fact that Sasada notices spirit, I wonder if she's going to end up being like a love interest for Natsume. If she's going to end up being someone he gets, paired up with along the way because she can kind of sense spirits a little bit. I'm going to be curious about that. That's going to be interesting. But yeah, so the one spirit that is chasing after him is trying to get its name back. What's so scary is Natsume can kind of fight back against the yokai, but then he kind of can't. So it's a real good thing that Madara wants to get the book back and is helping him. We'll talk about Madara. We'll talk about Madara and this lucky cat. But yeah. So the one ghost tries to get its name back from it, and everybody wants to like pluck Natsume's head off of his shoulders. Everybody just wants to grab Natsume by his neck and like decapitate him, like that's gonna give them the book. It's insane. And I like that Madara luckily is like, nope, you need to let him go to interfere. And Madara is a very strong yokai, and so they're able to hold their own. It's so hilarious to me because right now I literally just started 2 series around the exact same time. I started this series and I started Puella Magi Madoka Magica, and both of those series have like little cat-like entities that are sidekicks to the protagonist, and they're both kind of creepy but kind of funny. Although I will say in Madoka Magica, that cat-like creature is much creepier and than this one. I can deal with Madara. That's all I'll say. But I can deal with Madara. I can deal with them. They are a little troll of a cat that is just very very egotistical, thinks highly of itself. It's like, I am the strongest thing here. I will get the book. But it seems to respect Natsume enough to not kill him himself. Instead, he's like, oh, this kid's got a death wish. He seems like he's going to be a fun time to follow around and see what happens. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow him around, see what happens. And then if he ends up dying, I'm going to take the book from him. Madara's end game is still, I'm very curious about it because, yeah, the cat spirit keeps saying, oh, well, once you're dead, I'm going to take that book away from you. Why don't you just hurry up and die? But he won't kill him. So I'm very curious, like, it would not surprise me if Madara has ulterior motives and if they're being driven to protect, if they're kind of like a tsundere and they actually want to protect Natsume, but they don't want to admit it. So they're just hiding behind that, oh, I'll kill you and take the book, but I'm actually protecting you sort of vibe. I don't know, but what a freeloader. It just basically lives at Natsume's house, eats all his food, sleeps on his bed, and basically is just following him around, helping him to do the names. But it seems like in the end, Madara's like, oh, I want the book of names from you, but it'll be a shame when you get rid of all the names. But I'm like, what's the point of the cat getting the book of friends at the end if all the names are gone? I talked about this in last week's episode. I'm like, I wonder if the book is actually just of sentimental value to Madara because it was Reiko's and he had a crush on Reiko. If that was the case, or if there's some other reason. I feel like we're going to find out as we go in the story, but it is kind of funny that the cat's protecting Natsume, even though these yokai killing Natsume would allow him to get the book, right? So we think. And here's the thing, too. The cat won't admit whether or not Madara's name is in the book, but why would you care if other yokai get the book before you? If you can just beat the other yokai, why do you care if they get the book? They can't control you. Your name isn't in the book. Again, I think that there's more to Madara's story than meets the eye, but Madara is playing everything close to the vest and isn't telling Natsume, so we'll see. We'll see how this goes down, but I thought that was pretty funny that the cat is just basically living in Natsume's house. Now, we find out that there are two kinds of spirits that are visiting Natsume. One kind is trying to take the book away from him forcefully so that they can control the yokai. The other kind just wants their names released. Throughout this entire episode, I could take so many screenshots of just Madara coming into frame. That stupid little lucky cat looks so adorable in 90% of this episode. He's just like a little pill bug. He just like scurries around. It's so freaking cute. And I want to just like put him in my pocket and go. He's adorable. He's a troll, and I don't quite trust him all the way, but he's adorable. But apparently returning the names takes a lot out of Natsume, which I think is interesting. I think it's interesting that giving the names back exerts a lot of energy. Sort of like, it almost feels like maybe getting the names gives you power, but giving the names back requires more energy. That's interesting to me, and I don't know if what's that saying is that it takes more energy to give love than it does to receive it. Maybe something along those lines. I also think it's interesting that a lot of these names have been waiting for years and years and years to be returned or to be summoned by Natsume. So I wonder if that's also using up some of his energy, the fact that it takes so much energy to give back, that's why he's so wore out. I don't know. It's interesting to me. But yeah, he's like, the book of friends will keep getting thinner and thinner if you keep doing that, and returning the names will exhaust you. I'm like, who knows if any will be left when I get it. I'm like, why do you care? And then he's like, maybe I should eat this brat before it happens. And he like just gets on there. He's like such a troll. There's more to Madara, and I want to know what his deal is, but I feel like that's like end game stuff. We're not going to find that till like the end of the series. So we'll see. We'll just have to see. So, okay, here's the one thing that I did want to ask. So we have Toko and Shigeru. Shigeru means dog, doesn't it? I feel like there's a character in Fruits Baskets named Shigeru. But they can see the cat. They can see the lucky cat. I thought he was a spirit. I thought he was a yokai. How can they see the yokai, but they can't see any other spirits? Is it because of the lucky cat shell? Is the lucky cat just, when they opened up the shrine last episode, it was like a little lucky cat figure. Has Madara made the lucky cat figure come to life, and the foster parents just think that it's a real cat and are treating it as such because what are the odds that a fake inanimate object could become real and have a consciousness? So it has to be a real cat. That was the only part that was a little confusing for me. If we're going to find out later about why the foster parents can see the cat, then don't tell me. But if it's something that's never going to get explained and it's literally just that the cat is in a little lucky cat form and that's why they can see it, then you can let me know in the comments down below. That was the only part of the episode I was like, but what? So, but yeah, this cat's just a freeloader. Just freeloading off of him. So it is July on the calendar behind Natsumi. It's July. And then we see Tsuyukami. And I'm going to be honest, I don't care if I could see spirits or not. If a tiny little like figurine, I'll show you my Attack on Titan figurine. If a little figurine like this suddenly like appeared by my meal, I would scream. So Natsumi's reaction is very appropriate where it's like, oh dear God, there's this tiny little man, in the shrine. I think of like the movie Indian in the Cupboard, only it's like yokai in the shrine. He plays it off well, saying that it went down the wrong pipe. And so he'd like to return his name. Now this part was hilarious to me, and that's that he tries to return the name, but the pages are stuck together. And Madara says that it's because Reiko was like eating rice while she was getting the names and just wasn't paying attention. Like, what? Also, I love that Madara tries to get onto Tsuyukami by being like, you're so small. And Tsuyukami's like, why are you a cat? Just the shade that they throw back and forth to each other is really funny. And some of the expressions that Madara makes are hilarious in this episode. So yeah, he tries to get the name back. It doesn't work. And he's like, no, you're not going to get your name back. So sorry. And they decide that he really wants to. And I'm glad that they do show us that when you try to tear apart the pages, it does hurt the spirit. So it's like, ooh, we don't want that to happen. So he's like, let's try to find the other spirit that's on this page. And then we can return both your names at the same time. That'll work. So I wondered if he wanted his name back because he knew that Hana was about to die and he wanted to be able to pass on in peace, and he wouldn't be able to like move on from this world and would be in agony without his name. So that seems to be why he was so amped to get it back. When we have this scene of Natsumi in the bathtub, I just want to point out that there are so many different anime where the person sits in the bathtub and the water just overflows the side. I'm like, I think it's because there's just tile in that bathroom, so it's not like getting anything like soggy or anything. But I just think of like the floor being slick and nasty. I'm like, the idea of filling the bathtub up and just letting it overflow is such a weird concept to me. But yeah, so they head down up in Nanatsumori. I love that everything here is so rural. It's a very rural environment. It's very relatable. Even though I grew up in the United States, I'm from the Midwest in a very rural area. So just like the countryside and the scarcity, it makes a lot of sense. And I like that it ties back to the original drought and then the rain. And what I like about this episode is it just kind of like, because it's happening in a rural area, you're like, oh, nobody's worshiping that shrine anymore? Like, what are the odds of that? But yeah, when it's scarce populations, there aren't as many people. And I feel like it makes an interesting commentary about like maybe aging society in Japan and like certain cultures dying out and the need to keep those traditions going. I feel like this episode kind of comments on it a little bit, which I find really, really endearing. So yeah, so we get a little bit of foreshadowing with the mirror. We get the mirror that we end up using later on, so that's fun. And then I will say this, I had no clue what that fruit was at first. I was like, is it a peach? But peaches in the US are a lot more orangey. Not orangey, but the peach color is not quite that pale. Like that almost looked like a radish in color to me. I know the shape wasn't right and there was no like stalk or anything, but it looked way too pale to be a peach. So that's fascinating to me that Japanese peaches are much paler in color. And maybe it's just the animation. Maybe it's just the style of it. But she gives him the peach and then says, lovely weather we're having. I love that she carries on the phrase that Tsuyukami gave to her. And then she leaves. And the moment that Madara's like, oh, she's gonna die, I was like, you damn trolling cat, how dare you? Like, Madara does not mince words. And he's like, well, she doesn't smell very tasty. People don't smell tasty if they're dying. I'm like, oh my God, Madara, I cannot with you. Cannot. But yeah, so they go to the little shrine. Again, there's so many little cute moments with Madara, like his just little chibbiness. Freaking adorable. I cannot even. And so yeah, he's like, are you a real god? And he's like, no, I've just been hiding here and people just think that I am. And he talks about the coincidence that caused people to leave him offerings. A lot of this series is talking about loneliness and abandonment and isolation, because we got that with the one ghost in the last episode briefly. And here we get it expanded more with Tsuyukami, where he shows that like being around people, interacting with people, it raised his spirits. It made him seem larger and larger and larger. And then the less people interact with him, the smaller and more diminished that he gets, which seems like a metaphor for communication and how necessary it is to communicate with others. Otherwise we feel isolated. And if we're alone, it's like we're powerless. So I really appreciate that in this episode. I thought it was really well done. And he's like, the village no longer visits this place. And he's like, oh, would you want a peach? And he's like, oh, yes. And he asks about Hana and says that, you know, she's very close to dying. And then if I don't have my name back, you know, am I going to be just isolated forever? So yeah, I like that the expressions we get where they're like, there's another yokai that has name stolen after me. So let's, it says there's another yokai that has name stolen after me. I paid him a visit to lift my spirits. And he draws the picture of him. No, the picture looks nothing like what the yokai looks like. And I love that Madara is like, are you serious? This is what you got? Which is really funny. Yeah, the mouth is huge, but they're not lips. So yeah, he goes around looking for this yokai, searching for him. They can't exactly find him. What I like about this is you see the one yokai with like the long neck and everything, which is really funny. Again, tying back to Heaven Official's blessing, there is a spirit there's a scene in season 2 of that series that has lots of spirits around, and a lot of them, I was told in the comments, were based off of Japanese mythology, which is interesting in a Danmai because it's Chinese. But one of the spirits looks exactly like the one with the twisty neck, and I was like, oh, I know what that is. So I feel like I'm getting more and more ingrained into the Japanese and Chinese mythology, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, Hana comes back to the shrine and tells Natsumi about the time where she could sense Tsuyukami, and she wonders if she should have reached out, and says that Tsuyukami must be lonely. And she's like, don't laugh, but I'm certain I saw him once. He says, the weather is lovely like today, and so I come to see him all the time. I almost replied, but I'm afraid that he would vanish if I hadn't seen him. And there's something really cool about this moment where it's expressing this theme of being scared to speak up or being scared to talk to somebody because you're afraid you'll say the wrong thing and they'll disappear and they won't be with you anymore. But then the lesson is that no, forge those connections, make those connections, because you don't know what the future will bring. So it wouldn't have hurt to have done it, right? So I really like that. But yeah, also the idea of just the fact that Tsuyukami was lonely. And then I love that we see Reiko come to the grave, or to the shrine. I want to call it a grave, but it's a shrine. We see Reiko come there, and Reiko talks about him being alone. And this idea, I like Reiko saying, like, you know, you need to leave here because people are starting to worship this place less and less, and you're going to start diminishing. So go somewhere else. And Tsuyukami won't do it. And so I'm assuming that like she took his name, but it's so weird because on the one hand, it feels like Reiko is taking the names of these yokai that she's defeated so that she could control them. But then the more that this series, I know we're only in episode 2, but the more we find out about Reiko and her relationship with the spirits, it seems like she wanted to make those connections with them. She was trying to help alleviate their loneliness. But like with the ghost in the first episode, she doesn't seem to come back to them. So what's the deal? Again, with Madara and Reiko, it seems like there's more to it than we, the audience, know yet. So I'm going to be curious to see more with Reiko as we go. But poor Natsumi, talking about being alone. We see also him as a kid. And then when he says it hurts, like his expression there was so sincere and sad. But of course, then he wakes up and sees Madara on top of him. And he's like, oh, did you not sleep very well last night? I'm like, you cheeky bastard. Right? If you want to survive, never let your guard down. He says a weak heart attracts demons. I'm like, He also seems like, Madara seems like a demon because he's talking about eating people and he's talking about sensing weak hearts. So I'm like, Madara, are you a demon? What are we doing? And he's like, the faster you die, the happier I'll be. And the sooner I can get that book of friends. I'm like, oh my God. He has this little tail like wagging as he says this. I'm like, I'm really glad you're encouraging Natsumi to die, Madara. That's really nice of you. Ridiculous. But yeah. So they decide, Tsuyukami shows up and they decide that they're going to go track down the spirit that has the other name, who is actually terrifying. That spirit is super creepy with the black teeth and the black eyes. A lot scarier than the picture that Tsuyukami depicted on there, right? Insane. And he's like, my drawing was perfect. What are you talking about? It matches the characters on his chest. And so they try to reflect the sunlight against the spirit, but it doesn't quite work. And then every spirit's out here trying to strangle Natsumi and choke him out so that I'm like, he's supposed to be giving your names back to you, right? But these spirits are wanting the book. They don't necessarily want their names given back immediately. But the thing that's kind of sad with the one spirit that has the creepy face is that all they did was they're like, I've come for sustenance. And they're just like looking around the people walking by them. They're like, I have come. Give me food. I have come. Like they came out of the sunlight and tried to get like the food from the shadows and nobody could see them and was meeting their demands until Reiko shows up and she gives them the food. And she's like, hey, let's be friends. So that's interesting to me. It seems like she actively sought out these spirits that were lonely like her and befriended them. And she's like, if you beat me in a duel, you can eat me, but otherwise we're going to become friends. I'm still so curious, like what happened to her in the book to where she didn't meet up with these spirits again or give them their names back. But maybe she was just gathering the names so she could have friends of her own since she wasn't well liked by people in her community, it seems. My question is like, Natsumi's giving all of the names back. So what will the spirits do afterwards? I don't know. I'm very curious to see how the book ends up being used once he gives up all the names, which there's a lot of names in that book. But speaking of which, Madara helps Sasugi and Tsuyukami get their names back. I like that Natsumi rides Madara like freaking Falcor from Neverending Story. But he gives their names back and he like nearly passes out in that moment afterwards, which is really sad. And then we see Reiko. I like that he kind of gets Reiko's memories in this moment as she talks to Tsuyukami. She's like, the offerings won't last forever. She's like, you should find a better home while you have the strength for your own sake. So she was looking out for him. But he says, once you're loved, once you love, you can't just abandon it. So he's like, once you've been loved and once someone loves you in return, you know, it's not the same. So I wonder, based on that, if she fell in love and left Madara and the others in the book behind. But it was still attached to her so nobody else could get it because she was alive. I wonder if she took the book with her and fell in love and abandoned Madara, and Madara's pissed and was like, she left me. But he knows that she's gone, and so now he's just trying to like get back through Natsumi. I don't know. But it seems like, yeah, Tsuyukami tells her, he's like, once you've experienced love, you can't just go away. But yeah, so he ends up waking up and they talk about Sasugi, the yokai, using shadows to come down to the village. But now there's all of the city lights, so we may never see him again. And that's a nice commentary about kind of like the industrialization and modernization of the city, driving out the spirits. It's interesting, in the series Demon Slayer, there's more spirits and demons in the cities because they kind of gather there. And here it seems like for some spirits, the city and industrialization kind of drives them away. So that part's interesting. But yeah, I like that Madara's like, well, he doesn't have to deal with people anymore. He can go back to his friends in the mountains. Like, dealing with people is the worst to Madara. But yeah, he takes back the peach and the bun And then, damn it, I was not ready for Tsuyukami to just die. And then they just come out and say that Hana died and now he's going to die to go be with her. I was like, we haven't even gotten 20 minutes with this character and I'm really sad that he's gone. I'm like, they just make him really tiny and make us develop a relationship with him and then they just take him away. It's so sad. I don't like that. I don't like that. So yeah, dang it. I was really kind of crushed by it. It's super beautiful and it's really bittersweet. Her death means that I'll disappear. And I like that Natsumi like offers to like worship him so that he'll stay around. And he's like, no. He's like, I'm going to go join Hana, but thanks for the offer, kid. And then he ends up like putting the bun. I love the idea that he brings the yeast bun back. He brings the yeast bun back to sit at the grave, and Madara like gets onto him. He's like, "What are you doing that for? You're wasting food." But I love that Natsumi acknowledges that this shrine was a home for Tsuyukami, so it may end up becoming a home for future spirits. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. I like that a lot. And we get to see like that Tsuyukami's like followed her from her marriage to her growing up to her growing old. And he's like, I want to reach out and finally be able to touch her. And since he was a spirit, like a ghost, he's moved on to like the next life and he's left this plane of existence behind. It's so sweet though. And they're like, humans have been precious to me. Oh, lovely weather we're having today. And then she says, indeed it is. Oh, that just got me. That little scene of the two of them by the tree. That's so sweet. Madara is very sacrilegious, though, because he's just like, why are you leaving the yeast buns? Ain't you going to leave me some yeast buns? And Natsumi's like, let's be real. It's so cute. Oh, it's really sweet. An earnest heart is all that matters. I like that that's like our little lesson by the end of the episode of having an earnest heart. And then Madara like just ruins the Sonic Says motivational moment by stealing the rest of the yeast buns from Natsumi. What a troll. What a card. Madara is such a trickster and he can be frustrating, but I feel like there's something deep beneath the surface with his character, and I'm going to be very excited to see how it gets fleshed out in this series. But I like Natsumi as well. Kamiya does a really good job with them. So yeah, and then there is the end credits, which is like the most chill song ever. It's so chill and I love it. So, this episode was so bittersweet and it was so good, but I'm really excited to know your thoughts about it down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care. And yes, I am super excited to dive into next week's episode of Natsumi Book of Friends. Bye.